Super Mario Odyssey is one of the most unique titles in the Mario series. There are so many changes from previous Mario games that it's almost impossible to count them all. And this is obvious right from the very start of the game in its first two kingdoms. Welcome to Level by Level Episode 8. After a 2-episode break from Mario Odyssey, we're back to cover the game's first two kingdoms, Cap and Cascade. Both of these have the job of setting Mario Odyssey's tone, explaining the game's mechanics, and of course, just being fun kingdoms in their own right. Normally, these jobs would be reserved for just one level, however, I think it's important to look at both of these kingdoms as Mario Odyssey's introduction, as I feel like they work together to create the game's tutorial. So the plan for this episode is to explain how both of these kingdoms set up the game, and then once we're done covering the tutorial elements, we'll take a closer look at them each individually and talk about some standout moons. With that said, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. At 100k, I'll be ranking every moon in Mario Odyssey, and let's jump right into the beginning of the game. Right from the opening scene, we get our first major difference from most other Mario games. Instead of starting out displaying some sort of peaceful event like Mario receiving a letter, or Mario going to the Star Festival, or whatever else, the first thing we see in Odyssey is Bowser's fist flying right towards our face. I really love this opening as it puts us right into the action. Everyone already knows how the plot of a Mario game is going to go, so wasting no time in getting us right into the story is, in my opinion, a great idea. I also feel like this opening sets up Bowser as a threat really well. Mario Galaxy's cutscene did this as well, but I think I prefer Odyssey's just being a 1v1 fight against him. It's also really neat how Bowser uses his hat during this fight just like his boss fights in the rest of the game. This time it catches Mario off guard, however in the future Cloud and Moon Kingdom fights, Mario will have Cappy on his side to help him. After getting hit by Bowser's hat, he gets launched into the distance. Luckily, Mario Odyssey does not have fall damage, or else this would have been the end of him right here. Bowser then says that his goal for this title is to have a wedding with Peach, giving the player a clear end goal to stop. His airship then departs as Mario's hat flies into the propellers in the back, destroying it. Also, let me just say that this remix of Mario 3's airship theme is so good for making Bowser seem so much more intimidating. It's a shame it only plays in the cutscenes, but that makes its rare appearances stand out even more. The last thing we see is a small little teaser for Cappy before the cutscene ends. Without even looking at the level, this opening cutscene is fantastic. Easily the best to come from the Mario series, at least in my opinion. It successfully makes Bowser seem like a threat while also getting us right into the action and establishing his plan. Jumping us right into the action also sets this game up for having a faster pace than some of the other games in the series, and as someone who enjoys speedrunning, that was definitely something I was looking forward to. That brings me to another aspect about not only this cutscene, but all of Mario Odyssey's cutscenes that I really appreciate. They can be skipped. Now, as some of you may already know, I'm very critical of Super Mario Galaxy, and one thing that I absolutely cannot stand about it is that all of the cutscenes were entirely unskippable. Along with that game's much slower movement, it makes the game feel like an absolute slog for me. It also greatly reduces the replayability of it because I already know the story on the second playthrough and I just want to get to playing the game, which is especially bad in Galaxy's case as you have to play through the game twice to 100% it. Whenever I bring up this criticism, people always tell me it's pointless to get upset about because Mario Galaxy's story is so good, or there aren't that many, or whatever. To me, how good the story is has no effect on me wanting to or not wanting to skip a cutscene on repeat playthroughs. I absolutely love Odyssey's opening cutscene, but if I'm speedrunning the game, I'm happy that I can skip it and get right to the action. It keeps the game fast-paced and is one of the reasons why I think Odyssey is right next to Mario 64 in being the best speed games of all time. Alright, I'll try not to insult your all's beloved Mario Galaxy for the rest of the video. Let's finally jump to Cap Kingdom itself. We then descend into the Cap Kingdom, where Cappy is trying to wake Mario's corpse, and we get our first real bit of control. We don't get full control yet, but the game explains to us one of the most important controls in a 3D game, the camera. It lets you look around the place Mario just landed in, and I think explaining how the camera moves right at the start is pretty important. The next part of the tutorial is the jumping bit. Getting the jump out of the way is also good since Mario is Jumpman himself, so that'll obviously be a pretty big part of the game. Upon finally hitting the button, Mario will wake up, startling Cappy and causing him to run to a nearby hill. This leads us to actually getting to move Mario around, and I want to bring up something I mentioned from episode 6 of this series where I talked about Kirby and the Forgotten Land's first level, Point of Arrival. By the way, I still haven't really been able to play the game, I'm only like 20% done, I've been too busy, please forgive me Kirby fans. But anyways, I said there how I liked that the opening portion of the level was very focused with only one direction to really head into, to show how it's going to be a linear game. Mario Odyssey on the other hand is for the most part non-linear, so instead of basically only having one place to go, the starting area here is very open for him to run around in. There isn't much to find in this area, but there are a few coins and frogs to jump on, showing how this game is going to be fairly open for you to take any path you want. That is further exemplified by Cappy here. You can go roll up to him to get his attention, or you could just head straight for where he's going to be as he'll run ahead of you, which is another thing good for speedrunning. The big area all converges into one path, however even then there are still 2 ways to go up it. If you haven't mastered the jump yet, you can simply walk up from the side. However, if you're used to using the jump from running around a bit, you'll be able to take a faster route by jumping up these 2 blocks on the side. It's nothing much, but it really goes to show how Odyssey was designed for speedrunning and replayability in mind. Which is why I always find it baffling when people say this game has no replayability, but Mario Galaxy does. Oh, I failed to not bring it up again. I'm sorry gamers, force of habit. Going along this path, we pass by 2 other scared Bonnetons before entering our second cutscene. Now before we get to that, I think now is as good a time as ever to talk about the aesthetic elements of Cap Kingdom, as it's probably the most obvious thing separating it from other opening levels from previous games. Pretty much every other Mario game has their opening level set in some sort of grassland or generic overworld. It makes total sense to do this, starting the player in a comfortable place to start, but after over 30 years, that starts to get a bit stale. Cap Kingdom, on the other hand, has a completely different aesthetic from not only any other first Mario level, but pretty much any Mario level in general. The entire kingdom is composed of mostly black and white colors with a heavy fog covering a lot of the land. The music here as well is not only a banger, but perfectly fitting in the mysterious and somewhat ghostly new land. I also love how hazy the buildings in the background are. It adds a lot to how mysterious the kingdom is, while also making it feel a whole lot bigger. When we arrive into Cap Kingdom, it just suffered an attack from Bowser, so on top of the unique black and white aesthetic, the several Cap homes and ships are destroyed, leaving a lot of ruins and smoke around the area. All of this combined together to give Cap Kingdom an incredibly unique feel from every other opening level in Mario history. But back into the gameplay here, we have Mario and Cappy's first ever meeting together. Here Cappy explains his part of the plot, that Bowser came to Cap Kingdom to kidnap his sister Tiara for Peach to wear during the wedding. Not only does this set up why Cappy would want to join you pretty well, but it also shows how the other kingdoms in the game are going to be involved with Bowser traveling to them in order to collect things for his wedding. From there, Mario and Cappy finally join sides and their real adventure begins, which is shown by the second area of the kingdom. Much like the first, there's a clear path that you have to go towards, however it's still open enough for you to explore, and there is significantly more to explore here. This area is meant to teach you about throwing Cappy, so a lot of different elements here interact with Cappy to give you some sort of reward. You could pull out this pole to get a few coins, break some crates to get a few coins, and so on. This is most obviously displayed for you by these 2 sets of poles. You can clearly see there's coins behind them, but with the poles blocking your way, it's impossible to collect them. That's when you would likely try throwing Cappy as the game is telling you to do in the corner, thus rewarding you with the coins. There are several different hidden areas that you can go to, like this one here filled with Bowser posters that cover up a few small coin piles. There are even some smaller things that you can do, like turning on these light bulbs. They don't reward you with anything, but they're just fun to interact with. As I said, all of this acts as your tutorial for using Cappy, along with giving you the chance to explore a bit. However, even if you ignore all of this, the game won't let you move on unless you use him on this lever right here. This ensures that the player at the very least knows how to use Cappy before moving on, which is pretty important seeing as he'll be one of Mario's main tools. Unrelated to the Cappy tutorial, but I also really like how this bridge is made of hills so that you can use Mario's roll move to roll down it at the speed of sound. Oh right. We then run into our first enemies of the game, these little Goombas. They're the big test of this second area, as they're meant to show off how you can use Cappy to fight them off. You could also jump on them if you'd like though. In fact, you could just ignore them entirely. I think giving the player the option to move on past these enemies is good, just so that they don't feel the need to put themselves in any danger. If you do fight them though, then you'll be able to get a few extra coins, which is nice. Even if you took damage from the Goombas though, there's a few suspiciously placed flowers, and if Cappy hits them all, a bonus heart will spawn, once again rewarding some experimentation. Our second section ends by needing to enter into the Cap Tower. The door requires us to throw Cappy at it, once again showing how Cappy can interact with the environment. I also like how the door has a cap design to show off this fact. I've always liked how these doors looked. So far in this level, we've had 2 main sections. The first let us get a basic understanding of the controls, the second let us learn how to use Cappy, and the Cap Tower acts as our introduction to the capture mechanic. Well, before we get to that, we do have a few more things to use Cappy on, namely these question mark blocks. Each of them reward the player with a ton of coins, and the best way to get them all is by using Cappy and holding him in place. There's even a few behind the start, which is neat. From there are a few platforms separating you from the other side. These each have 4 coins on top of them, but they can also sink, which can lead the player to learning the swimming controls. But once Mario finally reaches that other side, there's nothing but a bunch of frogs over here. With no way to go up, okay, well you could technically use some very precise jumps, but with no way to go up for bad players like you specifically, there's nothing else but to test throwing out Cappy on these frogs here. This brings us to our third cutscene of Mario entering into the frog's brain. The capture mechanic is one of the most important aspects about Mario Odyssey, so introducing it right here in the first level makes sense. The frog being the game's first capture is also really helpful due to how it controls. It's essentially the exact same as Mario, with it being able to walk on the ground and jump the same way he can. The major difference here is that the frog's jumps are much higher, allowing him to scale the walls that Mario previously couldn't. that. Making the first chapter really easy to understand like this is, in my opinion, a good way to introduce the concept. Everyone already knows that frogs jump high, so the way the frog works here is easily understood. The frog is also lighter than Mario, allowing him to walk on the sinking platforms from earlier without sinking them. If you decide to go along that route, you'll be able to collect some coin rings. After the first few jumps, we run into our second horde of Goombas. I think these guys are used to show that captures are indeed still able to defeat enemies, as I'm sure some people would be a bit confused if they could. I also think this shows off how a capture isn't always a complete upgrade, as the frog does have the downside of no longer being able to throw Cappy, making this group of Goombas slightly more difficult to deal with. From there, we get a bit of an open area to explore a bit with the frog before bringing us back to the main path. The game then explains to you how you can actually leave the capture. Don't worry, Mario isn't trapped as a frog forever, and you can continue on to the fourth and final section of the level. Or you can get this king heart from this chest, which you may find helpful for the next bit, so let's take a look at that. The top of the cap tower gives you a checkpoint which will heal your damage if you got hit by the Goombas before. There's an arrow pointing right on top of it to help guide the player into collecting it. The brim of the hat tower just goes to show off the ruins a bit more, with a few more distraught citizens and destroyed homes. That means the only real place for Mario to go is... Whoa, Mario, what are you doing? Stop. Mario, stop! Mario, get down! Stop! Okay, so the real next place for Mario to go is toward the top of the tower. And once we reach there, we get to meet the other four main bosses of the game, the Brutals. Their role in Odyssey is being Bowser's wedding planners, and it's nice to see some new villains after seeing the Koopalings for quite a while there. The boss fight itself is pretty easy here. First you have to knock off Topper's caps, and then you're able to jump on his head. You attack using Cappy, which you're already well used to doing, so this boss essentially acts as one final test of you controlling Mario before letting you move on. After 2 hits, Topper is defeated, and you get to capture the second capture of the game, the Spark Pylon. This guy brings you into the Cascade Kingdom, and we finally get our title card. Cap Kingdom was a phenomenal introduction to the basics of Mario Odyssey. It gave us a look into how Mario controls, and it even gave us a first look into a capture and a boss fight. However, one thing that Cap Kingdom didn't do is show off Mario Odyssey's main collectible, the Power Moons. Now that's not a bad thing, in fact I actually think it works better to introduce them in the second level, as to give the player some time to just learn the controls and gimmicks. With that said though, that's why I believe a discussion about Mario Odyssey's introduction would not be complete without also talking about Cascade Kingdom, so let's jump right into that. Cascade gives us our first chance to explore a kingdom like how you'll be doing for the rest of the game. Mario and Cappy arrive by Spark Pylon, which snaps upon their arrival, meaning there's no way for them to get back to Cap Kingdom. We're then introduced to the game's first moon, fittingly titled Our First Power Moon. The cutscene points us to the shining rock at the top of the starting pathway. After a brief conversation with Cappy, we're off to explore this small new area. There are several small things to talk about in this starting area. For one, there's obviously another checkpoint right in front of you, however if you go backwards you may find these strange purple coins. Upon collecting them, they get added to your second coin counter and you're told that there are 50 total to collect. The game doesn't tell you what they're used for until Sand Kingdom, but it's nice that they're still here to give some rewards for those exploring. There are a few more sets of purple coins in the starting area to look out for, so there's a decent chance that the player will find at least one of them. Something else that's placed right in front of the player is an introduction to the Cap Cloud platforms. These will turn into usable platforms when Cappy touches them. While it's already pretty obvious based on its design that hitting it with Cappy will do something, it's smart to introduce it in a completely safe environment. Successfully using it will reward the player with some coins. Finally, the last thing of note in this starting area is the pole in the back, which shows you that you can actually climb poles. While climbing the pole doesn't reward you with anything tangible, it does let you get a view of Fossil Falls in all of its glory. I think that'd make this a good time to talk about this kingdom's aesthetic. This is much closer to the standard grass openings from other Mario games, however, it's still significantly different. For one, and most obviously, it's combined with prehistoric elements like dinosaurs. There's of course the T-Rex, which we'll get to later, but the waterfall is also underneath the skeleton of a Triceratops. The skull gives the kingdom a very distinct look, and the ribs jutting out over the waterfall makes it look even cooler. Oh, and the waterfall itself looks fantastic and makes this kingdom feel more lively than most other starter levels. There's also a ton of breakable blocks placed around the kingdom, and to match the prehistoric theme, they're covered in pixel art from the original NES Mario Bros, which is just a neat touch. But the thing that really brings this kingdom together is its theme. Fossil Falls is one of the best songs in the Mario series. It gives the feeling of grandness perfectly fitting of an ancient giant waterfall. I think that's a good way to describe the aesthetic of this kingdom as a whole, grand. Looking back at my Kirby episode, I said that first levels have the job of not only teaching the players about the game, but also selling them on it as well, and that's what I think Cascade Kingdom is here to do. Despite only being a medium-sized kingdom, this still feels grand and leaves a great first impression of the game. But that's enough about how amazing this kingdom looks. Let's get back to the mission at hand. Going up the path to the moon, we have the choice of either jumping up or going around the side. Jumping up acts as another small shortcut, so again, it's a nice alternate path for slightly more experienced players. On the other side, we have our first encounter with these rainbow enemies that appear a lot in the game, and I still don't know the name of them to this day. Not gonna look it up though. What, you actually think I put research into my videos? Please, my sources are all made up. Anyways, these guys can't be jumped on, so it's a good enemy to show how useful Cappy can really be. After defeating them, we're introduced to our third capture of the game, the Chain Chomp. As opposed to the first two captures, the Chain Chomp is an enemy that can actually damage the player. The purpose of this guy is to show that enemies as well can be controlled by Mario. Upon capturing the Chain Chomp, you'll be able to see that he controls fairly different from Mario, being stuck to a spot on the floor but being able to be slung forwards. If the player was lucky enough, they may have even been able to witness the Chain Chomp breaking the blocks placed around it, which would tell the player that the Chain Chomp is able to break rocks. This tells the player that the Chain Chomp is what's going to be used to break the blocks surrounding the first moon. With one launch of the Chain Chomp, the rock breaks, revealing the game's first power moon. This was a great and simple first mission to introduce not only the concept of power moons for the rest of the game, but also expand a bit more on the captures. It was also important for them to introduce the Chain Chomp specifically here, as it'll be an important tool for the player for the next story moon of the kingdom, so why don't we go ahead and take a look at that. Upon completion of the first moon, another cutscene plays showing off Madame Brood at the top of the waterfall, clearly indicating that that's the next objective. The bridge in front of Mario and Cappy also falls over, which brings them to the Rusted Odyssey. Cappy suggests that Mario throw him onto the globe, and upon doing so, we're able to add the power moon we just collected to the ship. But it's not enough to really do anything with, causing the player to head towards the boss fight the cutscene showed off earlier. I also like how throwing Cappy on the globe this first time is entirely optional, so for speedruns, you could just run straight to Madame Brood. On the path up, there are a few coins to collect, but the next real thing of note is the split right here. You could either continue on to the Horde of Chain Chomps, or you could turn back and be introduced to another capture, the T-Rex. This is one of the biggest captures in the game, allowing Mario to tear through these blocks from before and even defeat the Chain Chomps in the ground. This capture here is another thing that's meant to sell the player on Mario Odyssey, giving them a pretty exciting capture right off the bat. The T-Rex also leads to one of my favorite speedrun skips with Dino Skip. Essentially, instead of climbing up the rest of the way, you can make the T-Rex jump on this trampoline here and uncapture him at the perfect moment, entering into the boss fight. I'm like 99% sure this isn't intentional, but it's in the game anyway, so I can still say I like it. But if you do decide to go down the main route, you'll eventually run into a large horde of these rainbow guys from earlier. These are placed here to further show the destructive power of the T-Rex, as he's able to just ram through these guys with ease. At the very end of this path, we run into a big Chain Chomp placed next to a wall suspiciously covered in those breakable blocks from earlier. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that launching this big Chain Chomp toward it will probably be the solution here, and you'd be absolutely right. Breaking down the wall reveals a strange looking 2D wall with sprites from the original Super Mario Bros. Along with it, a strange pixelated pipe is present as well. Going into it will cause Mario to become flat. This acts as our introduction to the game's 2D sections, which are present in a majority of the game's kingdoms. This also comes with a phenomenal rendition of Fossil Falls' theme in 8-bit, really making this segment feel unique. The controls of 2D Mario are relatively simple to understand, so this segment of the level isn't awfully difficult. One thing I do like is how there are several coins that you can access depending on how you break the bricks above your head. Oh, that's another thing. To align with introducing the controls, breaking bricks is required to progress, so this section shows that that's something Mario can actually do. If you're really observant, you may even be able to reveal this hidden block and be rewarded with a power moon, but we'll talk more about those in a bit. Reaching the top of the wall shows that jumping off a 2D wall will bring you back into 3D. From there, the only thing between you and Madame Brood is one more giant breakable rock, which acts as one last check to make sure you know how to use the Chain Chomps beforehand. In this area, you may even be able to find that knocking one Chain Chomp into another will cause both to be launched due to these two Chain Chomps' close proximity. But with one last Chain Chomp launch, we enter into the boss fight. With this being our second boss fight of the game, the difficulty ramps up a bit here, as Madame Brood will take 3 hits to defeat as opposed to the 2 Topper took. Madame Brood's main form of attack is using her gold Chain Chomp to bite the player. This is where the introduction of the Chain Chomp from the first Power Moon and the rest of the kingdom is so important. Since the player has already been introduced to the capture, the boss acts as one final trial of your knowledge. Throwing Cappy at the golden Chain Chomp the first time will remove its hat instead of capturing it, which shows the player that enemies wearing hats are going to take a little bit of extra effort to capture. Throwing Cappy a second time lets you capture the Chain Chomp and launches straight back into Madame Brood. After that first hit, Madame Brood will cruelly throw her Chain Chomp at you before tucking it back and returning to how the fight was before. Hit her 2 more times and the boss fight is won, rewarding Mario and Cappy with a multi-moon. This boss fight is really well designed as it perfectly builds off the Chain Chomp concept from earlier and is fairly easy for a beginner boss. On top of that, there are some secret things you can do in this fight to help speed it up. If you recall my episode about the Robo Brood, I said one of my favorite things about Mario Odyssey's boss design is how they implement faster but more difficult strats for each boss fight to make them more fun to fight against on multiple playthroughs. In the case of Madame Brood, during her phase where she throws the Chain Chomp, you can actually jump on top of it, stopping it from moving, allowing you to throw Cappy at it to capture it faster. In fact, with good Cappy spacing, you could do something like this where you backflip onto Chain Chompykins right as Cappy is returning to nearly instantly remove its hat. It's a simple skip, sure, but doing it always feels satisfying. But with that, the main story of Cascade Kingdom comes to a close. Oh, I guess we still need one more power moon to move on. This is actually something I really like about this tutorial though, as it introduces us to one final major element of Mario Odyssey. The fact that doing the main story in each kingdom won't provide you with all the moons you need to progress. Making the requirement to leave just one moon over the amount you get from the story gives the player the chance to explore the kingdom looking for more moons. Of course, they could have gotten the one from the 2D section earlier, and there was another one they could have found here with the T-Rex, however after beating the main story, several new moons unlocked for the player. I think this was done for two reasons. One of them was to show that the kingdom goes through changes after the story is completed. The other reason was to make sure that the player actually did the story and didn't just grab 5 random moons to skip Madame Brood. Also, yes, commenter, I know that there are still 5 moons technically present in this kingdom before Madame Brood, but 2 of them require glitches to collect and nobody's going to be doing this on their first playthrough, so my point still stands. There are several different options for moons to grab, but once you finally settle on one, you can finally end Mario Odyssey's tutorial and head to Sand Kingdom. Overall, both Cap Kingdom and Cascade Kingdom act as excellent tutorials for Mario Odyssey. It allows players to get used to the controls in a unique and fun environment, while simultaneously giving them a small taste of what the game will be like as a whole. Pretty much everything you would want from a first level is present in both of these two main stories. Now that is definitely the most important aspects of these kingdoms. However, Mario Odyssey is designed for the player to come back to previous kingdoms in order to collect every single power moon. So how are these kingdoms post-story? Do they hold up to some of the others? Well, that's what we're going to look at this final portion of this video. I described both of these kingdoms as being medium-sized kingdoms earlier. You can sort the kingdoms in Mario Odyssey based on their purple coin counts. Small kingdoms have none, medium kingdoms like these two have 50, and the large kingdoms have 100. It makes sense for these to be smaller than large kingdoms since your progression through these is meant to be mostly linear. You can tell that by the layout. Even compared to some of the other medium kingdoms, Cap and Cascade kingdoms are laid out in a somewhat linear path. This isn't a bad thing, it's just something I feel is important to mention as exploration wasn't the primary focus of these two in particular. With that said, let's take a look at Cap Kingdom. There are 31 moons present here, the least amount of any of the medium kingdoms. Now, as a secret between you and me, you know how I said I would rank every moon of Mario Odyssey at 100k? Well, since I know that video is going to take a long time to make, I may or may not have already ranked about a third of the game's moons, including every moon in Cap and Cascade. So that way, I already know what the standout moons are. Most of the moons on the main area are fairly easy. There are a few like frog jumping above the fog and frog jumping from the top deck that expand a little bit more on the frog capture from earlier, and there are several moons requiring the new use of the Paragoomba capture like taking notes in the fog. The best moons of this kingdom though definitely come from the sub-areas that you can access after the story. First off, the Frog Pond sub-area acts as the kingdom's best test of the frog capture. You have to try and find all 5 moon shards hidden around this area, and some are actually pretty well hidden. This is definitely the moon that took me the longest to complete in this kingdom. Okay, there is one exception, but we'll get to that later. The moons in the sub-area also get some bonus points for being able to be done captureless. Another fun sub-area is this one unlocked by the Moon Rock. It sends Mario into a roll and is completely unique for this sub-area, making it one of the most prominent in the kingdom for being super fast paced. The alternate moon here is also really good, requiring you to roll on a skinny platform to get it. The last notable sub-area here is the push block one. I've always enjoyed how this one looked, and the hidden moon is also in a really good place. There are a few other solid moons here, but those are the ones I think are the most notable. Unfortunately, there are 2 more moons that I think are pretty important to mention here, but not for being good. First is the Forgotten Treasure. Basically, you have to just go to a bunch of random locations around the kingdom until Cappy remembers where his moon is. This takes forever, and the worst part is that you can't just skip to the final location. You have to go to each and every spot that Cappy says. This goes against the speed philosophy most of the other moons in the game go by, which makes this easily one of my least favorites. The other moon, the one that took me by far the most time in Cap Kingdom, is Taxi Flying through Bonneton. If you've played Odyssey, you would understand why this moon is so stupid, but if you haven't, what you have to do is capture these random binoculars, look up in the sky, and find some random flying taxi. This is just really stupid. Plus, even after you see it, it takes forever for the moon to actually reach the kingdom. So yeah, definitely not a fan of this one either. Aside from those 2 though, the rest are fairly solid. The moons aren't too horribly special here, and I also don't want to give away too much for my moon ranking, but I think that covers all I want to talk about for this video. Cascade Kingdom has 40 moons, and with this technically being the second kingdom, I find the moons here to be a general improvement over Cap Kingdoms. This does have another moon like the Taxi, this time with a Sphinx, however the rest of the moons are very solid. The Captain Toad moon is hidden in an actually pretty good spot, the second timer challenge at the top of the cliff is fun to do, but once again, most of the standout moons come from the kingdom's sub-areas. One of the sub-areas use Chain Chomps hitting each other to launch into some targets. Lining up these shots is a lot of fun to do, with the extra room being pretty well hidden. There's another sub-area that's a big 2D section with a lot of interesting jumps between moving platforms. The purple coins here are especially well placed, requiring the player to go on top here, or you can do a really tricky jump to get them as well. One of the sub-areas lets you control the dino to take out what must be like 50 rainbow enemies, which is probably the dino's most standout moon. There are a lot of other solid moons here, but again, those are the most notable to me. So with that said, how do these kingdoms hold up in the level by level tier list? This is really difficult to do as I feel like they work best when they're together. Combined, these are definitely S tiers, however I think it only makes sense to rank them based on their own. Cap Kingdom does a great job teaching the player the basics of the game while also standing out from the start of every other Mario game. However, after the main story, the moons are somewhat lower than the other kingdoms. I think considering the post-game as well, Cap Kingdom will take a high A tier. Had the moons been on a similar quality to some of the bigger kingdoms, this would have likely moved up to S. Cascade, however, is definitely deserving of being S tier. Not only does it give the player a great chance to learn about the game's core gameplay, but many of the moons here are fun to collect. Combined with its fantastic aesthetic, this easily deserves its place in S tier. But anyways, that's it for this video. Are you all mad at me for not considering Next to Glass's Bridge a notable moon? Let me know in the comments. I know that the moon section was slightly less in depth than some of the other episodes, however I really want to save a lot of the talk about specific moons for the moon ranking video. Plus the talk about the story for both these kingdoms was plenty long enough. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe so I can get to making that moon ranking a bit quicker. Dry bones for Smash, and I'll see you guys next time.